So I've been hearing about Tailwind CSS for months now, and I'm finally actually using it, so much so that I use Tailwind CSS for my most recent landing page for my YouTube for Developers ebook. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I created that landing page using Tailwind CSS and use this as kind of like a Tailwind CSS crash course for you to learn how to use it as well. All right, so I'm starting out here on YouTubeForDevelopers.com. Now, again, this is my new ebook that just launched last week, a developer's guide to starting a YouTube channel. And I just want to share about this really quickly. So I've learned so many things over the past 5 years or so, I guess, about having a YouTube channel that I wanted to share why other people might be interested in starting a YouTube channel as well. So it's great for your brand. It's great to have on a resume. It's great as a learning experience. Like I forced myself, kind of like Tailwind as an example, I forced myself to learn new things so that I can do new YouTube videos. So not only do you learn more about programming yourself, but you also learn how to communicate and how to do video and how to do lights and editing and all that sort of stuff. So I highly encourage people, one, to check out the book and then consider starting a YouTube channel no matter what stage of your career that you're in. So if you want to check that out, it's at YouTubeForDevelopers.com. You can also use that to check out what the actual site looks like. So this is what we're going to build, and I've got a sample project here, which is using Parcel. I've got a video on Parcel Bundler if you have never seen that before, but it's going to do the bundling for our site. And you can see I've also got a script imported here from Quez.io. So Quez Forms is what I use to handle my form submissions in my site. So if we come back and look at this down here, I've got to have a burning question section where you can actually submit a question that I will answer in my ebook. And instead of creating serverless functions or creating a server to handle those responses, I use Quez Forms to do that for me. So if you want to learn how to set that up, I've got a video on that as well. So I've got Tailwind integrated in here. And the way that we can see that is if we start to add some classes to our markup. So if we start with this big kind of H1 here, it should be pretty big. Well, in Tailwind, you start off with just telling it basically what size it is. And actually, before we do that, let me just show, like, Tailwind basically wipes out all default styling that you would get from a browser. So in this case, your H1 doesn't really look like an H1. It looks like a regular piece of text. So we'll start by just kind of styling this thing. And Tailwind has these classes or this kind of like scale for different sizings of things. In this case, I'm saying text to be 4XL. So if we save this, this text will come out to be pretty big. There is 2XL, and then there's medium and large and so on and so on. So we'll start by making this a pretty big piece of text. And usually your H1s are bold. So we'll say font bold. And we'll set the color here to text gray 800. Now, the way Tailwind does colors is you kind of say like, all right, text, and then the kind of the brand of color that you're looking for, or the shade of color that you're looking, not the shade, the general color that you're looking for. And then you give it a number between 100 and 900. And those are the different shades of your color. So you can think of like a 500 as being your base, and then 600 through 900 are getting darker, obviously. And then 100 through 400 are getting lighter. So that's kind of the way it breaks down for sizing in text. So here is a piece of text that is now bigger, it's bold, and it's got a color to it. So what we're trying to do on this first part is have this this kind of side-by-side section where we have this image, which is our cover image for the ebook. So let's start with doing, including the image here. So we'll do an image, and we'll have a source of /cover, JPEG, alt will be YouTube for Developers cover. All right, and then I'll put this back here a little bit. Then we'll start to have our actual classes. So the cool thing, if you look on here, what we want to do is round the corners, give it a little bit of a box shadow, that sort of stuff. So let's start to add all of that. So we'll do a rounded large, and also know that I've got IntelliSense popping up in here. That's from a plugin that I installed inside of VS Code for, let's see which one it is. It's Tailwind CSS IntelliSense. So it's showing me what classes that I have the ability to use. That's really great for Tailwind because there are so many classes. So we'll add those corners, and we'll do a shadow large too. So this is going to do rounded corners and then do your shadow. And let's just see what this looks like. Okay, so it's got both of those things and it's in there. That's really cool. That'll work. And now I want to start to work on this kind of like side-by-side action. So what we need is basically a Flexbox. Or actually, in this case, we're going to use CSS Grid to put these two things side by side. So we're going to do a grid. We'll say it's going to be grid. And then we'll say grid calls to, so this is going to be 2 columns. We'll have a gap of 10. This is your gap in between your columns. And then item center, that's going to be having them kind of vertically aligned. So notice these are vertically aligned here. And one of the things that we are missing as well is we want to start to kind of give a wrapper around this entire thing where it's got some padding and it is not taking up the entire width of our page. So this is our grid section here. We can also wrap this with another div. Let's move that one down. And then we'll start to set like a max width and then center the content to make sure it's in the middle of the screen. So we'll add a container. We'll say MX auto. That's margin X auto. So the margin 0 auto trick, if you've done that before to center stuff. We'll give a max width of 6 XL. We'll do a PY padding of top and bottom of 20, a PX of 6, for example. So now let's go and see. We should see now this stuff is centered. It's got a max width and it's starting to look a little bit better for what we expect. Now, I hope that as we start to add more and more of these classes, you'll kind of see how these things come together. And if you ever need questions, or if you ever have questions and need details on what you're looking at, if you look at container, for example, that's a class we just used. You can search any class that you want to and then go and see that inside of the docs. And the docs are really good. So I usually leave up the docs, especially as I'm learning Tailwind, because I go back and forth to it because I can't quite remember all the classes right offhand. Another resource that you probably want to check out is the Beginner Tailwind course from my friend Chris. And he created this course and it's available at beginnertailwind.com. And what you do is you learn about Tailwind and then you build this site, which this site looks pretty badass. And I took some inspiration from this site and the things that he taught in there. So I highly recommend checking out that course if you're interested in learning more about Tailwind. All right, so the other thing we're going to do is inside of our or below our H1, I'm going to copy over a piece of text here. All right, so there is that text. And we want the image to sit side by side with these 2 pieces of text and also actually one more piece of text with the, or not a text, but a link for the buy button. So we'll surround that with a div. We'll add an anchor tag here. I'm not going to worry too much about the href. I'll just say kind of here. And then we'll add the classes to this as well. So this will be by the course or something like that. So let's see what this looks like. This should stack the anchor tag here. This is but the course. That's not right. And notice that doesn't have any styling either. So we'll want to start to style kind of all of these things. So let's come down to our buy button and let's start to add things there. So I'm going to use a brand color. And to do this, we need to customize our CSS a little bit. So if I come into my Tailwind config, you can extend the colors that are built into Tailwind. And in this case, I added brand with that one. But I'm going to copy in all of the shades of that brand color because we're going to use those. Copy all of those in right there. And that should go through some more building. And what we should then have access to is the same way we use the built-in colors in Tailwind, we should have access to our brand ones too. So we'll set a background of brand, a padding X of 5, and a padding Y of 3. We'll set the text to uppercase. We'll say the text is going to be text brand 100. Now this is a pretty neat and common trick. Let's see, we might need to restart this thing since we changed our Tailwind config, but a trick is within a given color palette. And again, Tailwind has lots of built-in colors. If you do the lightest color of that palette, it often works well with a darker version of that color on the background. And I just realized this should be class instead of class name because we're not in React. All right, and there that is. So still not looking too great. So we need to add a few more styles to clean this up a little bit. Let's go back into our anchor tag. We're going to make this rounded. So we'll do a rounded medium and we'll set this to be inline block. That will make sure that it comes below our text up there. That's looking a little bit better. Did we get the text brand 100? All right, had a little bit of a cache issue now. So now the colors should be good. If we come back over You see this light text. So the lighter version of that red on the medium version of the red, or the 500 version of that red, that usually looks pretty good. So that's a neat little trick that you can use for some of your colors on different backgrounds. But this should not be this should be by the course. So it should be a little bit different than that. All right, and since this is a link, we can make sure this does not get underlined. So we'll do no underline there. And we could add hover effects here. So if you want to add hovers, the way that works is you basically prefix it with the hover keyword. And now you can change whatever you want. So if we then add shadow of 2XL, so if we add a big shadow to this when we hover, it'll probably be a little hard for you to see, but hopefully you can see a little bit on this video. But it's adding that. And you can also potentially translate this thing. So if you wanted to do a hover with a translate Y to, this would actually send it down to, you can do negatives in Tailwind, like by prefixing translate with 2. And the other thing you have to do, and I didn't quite know this for a while, is you have to actually include the word or the class transform as well. Otherwise your translates won't work. So let's see if this works now. That's probably a little bit more than we're looking for. So maybe just 1 in here. And these are not pixels. So that's just why it's jumping a little bit more than we want. So that's not great. I would actually probably get rid of that at this point. But you can add hover effects like that. So I'm going to leave the shadow, but then get rid of the translate. The next thing we can do is start to add the styling for our P tags. And these are ones that are going to be replicated for all the P tags. So I'm going to kind of show you a way that you can get around writing this every time. But let's start off with a text large. This will have a default of margin bottom of 8. We'll do a text gray of 700. And again, like these color palettes inside of Tailwind make it really nice for you to be able to have different shades of a given color and use them that way. So that's starting to look a little bit better. This is not quite exactly what this looks like, but I think that looks pretty good anyway. So what I want to say though, is that since we're adding all of these classes in here for each, or would be adding them for each one of the P tags, we can abstract some of that and come into our app, in this case, the P CSS, and do an apply and then add the styles that we want from Tailwind. So what this is saying is, I'm going to recognize this is a CSS file. What this is saying is for each P tag, it's going to go ahead and apply those Tailwind classes. So hopefully if we show that there's no class in here, we can get rid of that now, then you can see that this still kind of looks like what we've been working with. So that seems to work well. We've got the hover effect on here. And the last thing I want to show you as part of this hero is just how these can actually be responsive. So we started off with a grid and then we gave it 2 grid columns. Well, let's say we only want it to be grid on medium screens and up. So this kind of goes back to like your bootstrap grid system where you could define like how many columns on different screen sizes. In this case, we can just say, hey, we only want this to be grid when it's a medium screen size or up. So now if we come in and we shrink this down, we should see those kind of jump and stack on top of each other. So the way we want to change that is we could make this be a Flexbox instead of a grid. And actually that would work fine. But we can really just say that, hey, for those pieces of content, we want to go ahead and we could center them. But especially probably the main thing is just centering this image and then putting some margin at the bottom of it. So for our image, the way you can kind of think of this is we'll add an MB of 6, for example, margin bottom 6. And then for medium screens and up, we'll do an MB of 0. So we won't add that margin. So now that'll space it out a little bit. And then we can also use our MX auto trick to go and center that image inside. So I would say that looks pretty good for our hero. And you'll see there's a few other small things that I added into the actual site. But for the most part, that's what we're looking for. So the next section is, I won't add the Product Hunt button. That's just a link that you get from Product Hunt, but go ahead and check out YouTube for Developers at Product Hunt. So this is another one of those. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this entire thing. And the reason is we're using like the same sort of 2-column grid setup. Now we just need to swap out the images and make this image come last. So let's move this after the div. We won't need an anchor tag in this case. I'm going to grab the text here. Oh, I think I grabbed the wrong thing. Let me grab this text, that part, throw this into the p tag, and not get rid of that. This part is, what does this part say? Resume missing something? Resume. All right, and if we look at our site, this should look pretty close. So we want to swap out that image. So this image now, instead of being the cover, scroll down, will be our resume. And do we not have this inside of source? Let's see. Oh, resume PNG instead of JPEG. All right, so we should see now that is showing up. So that looks pretty good. The one difference here is for this image in particular, I probably shouldn't have done this. I already added the border radius and the hover effect or the shadow on the actual image itself. So anyway, with Tailwind, I can just kind of remove these classes, and now that should look pretty normal. Notice this shadow is a little harsher than the one up here. I kind of wish you could make more emphasized shadows, but you only get so many versions, and they're not super noticeable, which is kind of interesting with Tailwind. So let's see. Looks like this probably has like a smaller total width maybe on the other one, but same general idea, same layout. The thing we want to do now is make this have that different color. So let me slide back over, and we'll wrap this entire thing now with a class, and I'm using Emmet syntax here, a class of BG Gray 200, and wrap this entire thing. So the interesting thing about this is we want to have this part be full width. And you see that this gray obviously is not taking up full width. So what we're going to do is this container stuff, we're going to actually wrap each individual section with its own container. So let's move this one, this closing div, up to here. Here, nope, one more. Move it up to here. That way, this part down here should take up the full width, and we'll have to fix this. This part up here will not take up the full width. So let's scroll back down, and now we need to grab kind of that same line, and let's grab that and let's copy it to surround inside of our background color. Surround it this way. And let me do a format on here with prettier. All right, that should be a little bit better. And so now you see this is looking more like what we expect. So in this one, I added a few extra lines in here. We don't need to do those. I think that'll be pretty straightforward. It's really just kind of bolded text. There's not a whole lot to that. So just for brevity, we'll continue to move on, and we'll come down beneath this one. And if you look in this section in here, we want the entire width again. So if we want a full width section, we can grab something like this. So let's grab these two lines, and let's bring them down here. And instead of the background gray of 700, we're going to take our brand, or 200, we're going to take our brand of 700. And that should do a pretty dark color for us. And then inside of there, we'll set our text color to be text brand 100. Again, putting that light color of this, or light shade of the same color on top of the darker color. And if we look at the section, again, this is kind of a Flexbox or a grid type section. So I used grid before. Now we can use Flexbox inside of here. Let's close out that div. So we've got our parent container, and now we want to add the actual Flexbox part. So inside of the same one, we can say this will be a large flex. So only want to be Flexbox on screens that are large or higher. And then we'll say item center. So this is align item centers. This will be vertically align them. And I think, so the other thing we can do, let's actually show this. This is pretty cool. So let's first add in our H1, and this will look similar to what we had before. Text for XL, font bold, leading snug. So leading is kind of the spacing between the characters. So you can tweak those. So in this case, leading snug is a little tighter. And then MB of 6. And this section is the what you'll learn section. And then we'll have our p tag, and this will be class of the brand color of 100. We've already done that, so it should be fine. And then leading loose. So this should kind of spread those out a little bit. And I'm going to copy that text from over here, so we're not typing that whole thing. So let's paste this into here. And scroll down. So you'll see we have our section over here. And notice that this thing is taking up a lot more space. So the one thing we're missing is to wrap these two inside of a div. So we want them to stack on top of each other. And that will be one side of the equation. And then the other side of the equation is going to be an unordered list of our different items, our different talking points for what we're going to focus on. So we'll have a UL and then an LI and then a class name or class. This is not React class. And what we want to do is add that background color of dark. So we'll add the BG of a darker color than what the main background color is. If you look in here, this color for these UL elements are a little bit darker than the regular background color there. So this will be a BG, not fixed, but BG brand 800. We'll add some padding. So we'll just say P3 for padding, X and Y of 3. Do a rounded, medium, a shadow, large, text brand 100. I think that should be taken care of from up above. And then text 2XL to make this pop a little bit and stand out. And this first one is going to be how to overcome imposter syndrome. So a lot of what people fear about creating videos is that somebody will leave negative comments or they'll say something wrong. And honestly, that's just part of the process. And that's part of your learning process if you create videos. I can't say enough how much I suggest that people check out and learn how to create videos. So it looks like we're kind of missing something here. These two things should be side by side. And one of the things that we're missing is setting an actual width for these with Flexbox. So these will be large again, W dash. So for width 1-2. So this is basically going to split the width of these two sections to make them two equal columns, kind of like what we did before. So let's see if we add in that, what we get. And this thing is still wrapping down, looks like incorrectly. And I think our UL is not inside of our containing div. So we need to push this down below the UL. So now let's see, that's starting to look more like what we expect. Awesome. Yes, that is. So our P tag here, we need to update the font color of this one in particular because we set those applies before. So we'll just set this to the BG, oh, not BG, but the text brand 100. And that should look a little bit better. So here's one of the things that's really cool about Tailwind is I want to add some space in between these. So with CSS Grid, you have grid gap. Grid gap, I think, is in the works for Flexbox, but it doesn't work yet. So Tailwind actually has the ability to define that with a class. So you have a space X and then a number. So space X10 will put the relative 10, whatever it is. I don't know if it's 10. Let's see exactly what it is. Well, actually, what this does, it doesn't put it on the container. It goes into the children, I believe. And if we look at the second one, the SpaceX 10, it's going to add a margin left to spread these out a little bit. It does some calculation in there. So this is really, really cool to me how they added this feature in Tailwind, because that's something like with Flexbox to add those things is not fun, honestly, to work with. So I'm going to replicate this LI. I'm not going to worry about doing the same thing over and over again. Do this 4 times, and now that should be close to what we're expecting, except we want to add a margin bottom. So one of the things I'm going to do is hold down Option and click, and then get multiple cursors in here, and we'll do MB of 4 to add some margin bottom to those to spread them out a little bit. So now these are starting to look good. That's kind of what I would have expected. So a couple more sections that we need to work on. This one is actually fairly standard. There's just text, just showing an image. There's not a whole lot of styling in here, but let's go ahead and lay this one out anyway. So we're going to wrap this section with a div. We'll start off with an H1, and I'm just going to copy an H1 from up here. Again, no need to rewrite all of these styles each time, and paste it in. And this is going to be what YouTube has done for me. And then we'll add our image, and this is the cover images. Alt is cover images. just a screenshot of my YouTube videos, and then we'll add our classes in here. So class, we want this to be a rounded large and shadow 2XL. So scroll down. Now we see our image and we see the what has YouTube done for me. I think we are wrapped one div too many, which we don't want. So now we should be starting our new section. So our new section is going to need a lot of padding and the container stuff as well. So we will copy. Actually, let's just copy this whole div. So same general breakdown. We want to add that the padding, the max width, and then center this stuff. So if we scroll down, we should be getting close to that, except in this case, we didn't want this to be a flex. So we would get rid of that flex stuff, and now they should just sit on top of each other. And that looks good to me. So below that, we'll have some text and then a block quote. And the text is just kind of regular text. Let's put in a little bit in here. Let's grab that. Let's do our p tag and paste it in. We don't have to add any additional styling, again, because it's taken care of for us with our apply that we used. And you see we need some margin bottom with our image. So now this will spread those things out a little bit. So that looks fine. And the last thing is this block quote that we'll add in here. So let's do a block quote and paste that in. And what's kind of cool is we want to add, well, we want to make it bigger, but we also want to add like this, this border on the left. And to me, that seems like something that would be tough to do, but you can do it with Tailwind. So let's start with our classes in here. And this is going to be a class of 2XL. So we want to make this a little bit bigger. Our text gray of 800. We'll put a leading relax. So this will kind of space out the letters a little bit. We'll do font light. We can make this bold or whatever. And then this is the cool part. We'll do a border solid. And this should add in, you almost would expect it to add in border, but we have to also add in a size and a color. So what if we did a border 2? This should add an entire border around it. So we haven't set the color yet, but we only want to do this on the left. So you can also add a -L and make this a little bit bigger. And now we'll have a border on our left, you can see here. And so that looks pretty good. We'll also want to update the border color. So border brand, we'll use our brand color for this border. And then we'll want to add some padding left as well. So let's do a PL of 2. Will give us this, this block quote with the kind of thing, the block on the left to highlight that this is kind of a special piece of text. So I thought that was really cool when I figured out that you could do like an individual border to add a little effect like that. All right, next section to do is basically this just full width. And this is just saying like, hey, a lot of people get stuck in tutorial hell where you follow tutorials and you don't necessarily learn as much as you should. How do you break out of that? Well, one of the ways is literally just build the tutorials yourself. You'll learn much more from building a tutorial almost than you ever did following them. But regardless, I'm going to cheat a little bit because this is going to be, again, very similar to what we had up here. So I'm going to copy these two divs that have our dark background color and close those out. And I'm still not getting the formatting I was looking for in here, but that's fine. So we'll close those out. We don't need the Flexbox stuff in here. All right. And then what I did is just add a couple of big pieces of text. There's not a whole lot to this. So we'll start off with our paragraph, and this is want to break out of tutorial hell. And our classes, we've done classes for our p tags in the past with the apply, but we want to make these a little bit different. So this will be a text of 4XL, text center, text brand of 200. So again, a lighter version of the color on top of the bigger one. And then in this case, a margin bottom of 0. So let's go back. Let's see this. That looks good. And the next one we'll do is a p tag, build the tutorial yourself. And this one will be even bigger. So this will be a text of 6XL. We'll say it's a font bold, text center, and text brand 100. Now notice this is 100 versus this other one, the paragraph above it is 200. That's a way for us to emphasize which one should stand out a little bit more. So there's not a huge difference, but this font size being smaller and then the color being a little bit darker, a little closer to the background makes this one down here stand out. And I'm actually looking at the wrong page. This should be down here, but it should be kind of the same thing. So that looks pretty cool, I think. I don't know, did I uppercase this? I did. So we could also uppercase this if we wanted to. So to give this a little bit more emphasis, and then maybe not a period, but an exclamation would make it really kind of be kind of right there in your face. Did we get the uppercase? If we could spell uppercase, we'll now transform that thing. So that looks pretty cool. Last section I want to do is this testimonial section. And I thought this was kind of cool because this is another like Flexbox example where it's going to have two things side by side, and then it's using a slightly different background color up here. All right, so we're going to start with a new div, and this one needs to be the background color with the full width back here. And we're not setting a max width on this one, so we're just going to start with a class of flex. Actually, let's go ahead and add our elements here first. So inside of here, we'll start with our H1 of what people are saying. All right, so we'll have that H1, and then side or next to that is going to be both of our quotes. So this is going to be a div in itself, and for each one of our testimonials, we'll have a div to surround it. Then we'll have an image tag, as well as another div for an H2 and a P tag. So what all of that is we have kind of the right side over here. We have a div for kind of this card, and then we have the image next to the text here. And the text is two pieces, so that's going to be a Flexbox as well. So a little bit tricky, I guess, is kind of the easiest thing to say. But let's copy some of this information. So first one is from Jesse Hall, who is Code Stacker on YouTube, who you've probably already seen before. If you haven't, you should definitely go check him out. And then here is his quote. Thank you to Jesse for checking it out for me. Definitely go and check out his channel. And then the image in this one will be the Jesse, and this will be Jesse's picture. All right, so let's just see what we have so far. We don't really have any styling. This obviously doesn't look very good, but we got the beginning of the markup of what's supposed to be there. So now we'll start to actually update this stuff. So we want this to be a Flexbox, and we want to add a good amount of padding. So we'll do a padding of 24, and we'll do a background gray of 300. So this should give us that entire background there. And then you see that the what people are saying section is now so much bigger than the right section, or so much smaller, sorry. So with the actual text, with this one, we'll say class name equals, and we want this to have a width of 1/3. So we can do this with a W1/3. What we'll also need to do is then come down and update, and this should not be class name, but class. The next section will be a class or a width of 2/3. So now we're able to separate those out in the widths that we want, which is nice. We want this text to be centered with these quotes. So we'll do inside of our flex definition, we'll do an items center that will center this text here. So that looks good. And we can style our H1. So we set the width on it, and this will be a text 4XL font, bold, leading, snug, text gray, 800. I think that's it or so for now. And this might actually be better. I've kind of gone back and forth about this. Should this be testimonials, or what are people saying? Testimonials a little bit shorter, and I think that works out well. So that looks cool. Now I think we should get into the styling of the individual card. So for each individual card, it will be a medium Flexbox. So we only want it to be flex on medium and up. We will use our space X trick to space out the image and the text. So space X10. We'll do an items center to make sure they're vertically aligned. We'll add a border, a padding of 8. shadow of 2XL, rounded large. You've seen all of these before, background gray 100. So the background color, the shadow, the rounded will just kind of make this thing pop and stand out a little bit. I guess we didn't add the, flexes, the flex here. So this should be a flex and put those things side by side. And let's go ahead and style our image. So again, we've seen a lot of these before, but we'll do a rounded full. That will give us a circle image. Add a shadow here as well, shadow large. MX auto will center this thing if it needs to be. MB 10. And I'm going to add a class of testimonial image. And the only thing I'm going to do with that is just kind of set a max height on this. So we could have updated these images to be a certain height, but I want to just update it here to make sure. So testimonial image will have a max height of 200 pixels. And let's see if that picks up. That should make that image smaller. It looks like it's not quite, there we go. So there is that image, and this will look better on this type of screen. So that's pretty much it for that. I think we need to style the name. Yeah, so we don't have any styles inside of our H2. So let's go and grab those. And we'll do a text 2XL, not as big as the main text on the left-hand side. Font bold, leading, snug, text gray. And I will add some margin bottom of 2. So now let's scroll over. And did we not add the right text color? Text gray 200. This should probably be 800 if we get that right. So now let's look. All right, so that's looking pretty good. This card should also be responsive. So if we do this, that thing actually didn't quite shrink down the way I thought it would. So let's double check our responsiveness on that card. So inside of our card, this is medium Flexbox. Did we just not come down far enough on this? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so it's stacking now. We want this to have more room quicker. So what we'll do is we'll get rid of this testimonial side by side earlier as well. So we only want this Flexbox to be on large screens. So if we look now, if we get down to a certain point, this should stack all of this information like that. Now the difference is, or with that, now we want to update the widths to only be defined when we are on large screens and above too. So when we are large, it'll separate these columns. When we're not, they will take up the full width. So let's look at this now. That's looking more like what we'd expect. And then now if we scroll down some more, now we see a pretty good responsive card inside of there. The only thing I see us missing is a margin bottom on this part up here. So we can do a margin bottom of 10 and then a large MB of 0. So we only want the margin bottom if we're on smaller screens or if we're like medium and smaller. Otherwise, we'll kind of have this side-by-side card, which I think is pretty sweet. So those are the majority of the sections that are inside of the YouTube developer site. We've already built this one. This is another side-by-side one. And this, I want to mention, is a form that is on my site to be able to take questions if you have any that you want answered about starting a YouTube channel. And for this one, I used Quez Forms. You can check out a video on Quez Forms on YouTube as well. It allows me to not have to build out my server at all. I just add a little bit of front-end code and their library, and it will take care of the form submissions and send them to me. So that's really the majority of the site here. I just want to give like one additional shout out to go check out the book on YouTube for developers.com. If you're interested in starting a YouTube channel, if maybe you've never even thought about it, but now you're starting to think it might be worthwhile, it's something you can put on your resume. If you want to prove to people that you can speak, that you can talk about technical topics, that you have technical chops or design skills, having a YouTube video that people can go and see is a great way to do that. It's one of the best ways, in my opinion, of proving yourself to other people is through blogs and videos and that sort of stuff. So I highly recommend going and checking out the YouTube for developers.com site or the ebook. And you can also grab, I'll have a link to the source code below where you can see the entire source code as well. Let's see where this one is. YouTube for developers. This is private. I will go and update this to be public so you can check it out to see all the source code that you want. Anyways, question of the day for you. Have you tried out Tailwind CSS yet? And do you enjoy it? Let me know in the comments below. I've been using it for maybe a month now on a couple of different things, and I really am enjoying it. So I really want to know what you have to say. Thanks for checking out the video as always, and I'll see you in the next one.